Well, hey y'all. Here's our latest in our studies for the amateur radio technician course. This particular video is on emergency services and emergency communication. So those of you in the prepping community, this one's for you. And just how all this goes together and some history and that to go along with it. Some stuff that's not going to be on the test, but some information that hopefully you'll find useful. Okay, first let me give you all a couple of definitions here, and we'll open it up. Couple of organizations you need to know about, and some of this will be covered on the test. There's two organizations that they mention on the technician class test. One is called RACES, RACES, Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, and the other is what's called ARES, ARES, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. Okay, RACES is defined as a radio service using amateur stations for emergency management or civil defense communication. ARES. The Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARES, consists of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment with their local ARES leadership for uh, communication duty in the public service when disaster strikes. All right, let's talk a little bit about both of these organizations and what they're going to mean to you in the amateur radio service. Now, when I got my license in '86, RACES was still a big organization. They were locally aligned with the county civil defense organization. Okay, now these civil defense organizations you don't see anymore. They sprouted up, I want to say back in the 50s, okay, with the Cold War and all such as that. And the amateur service was brought in to help foster radio communications with all that. Cold War stuff, in case we ever went to war with the Russians. Okay. The breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991, however, and just general loss of interest, civil defense people, preppers and tinfoil hat people and all this kind of stuff. The thoughts of the sort of thing. Just it. I think it basically outgrew its time. And they did have amateur radio stations on the air from the civil defense sites, and these guys were licensed amateur operators. The one here in my county had one. The call for the racing station was WC9AAE. So you'd have a WC followed by the number and then three letters behind it. And these were nationwide. Don't know that every county had one. I never really investigated that. I wonder maybe if some of the smaller counties, the ones that were very rural, didn't get swallowed up by some of the bigger counties, or just didn't have enough manpower to cover it. That I don't know, can't answer. But my county here is big enough that it had a civil defense set up and a racing station. It fell by the wayside sometime in the '90s. So even though it's on the test, you're not really going to see a racing station anymore. Okay? So deal with it for the test, but then you don't have to think about that anymore. Okay? ARES, on the other hand, kind of grew out of that, sort of morphed out of the races thing. And the National Weather Service had more to do with this than actual civil defense, where, like I said, civil defense was geared more toward Cold War stuff and things like that, where ARES to me always stemmed more with severe weather, most specifically thunderstorms and tornadoes. I'm here in the Midwest where, you know, starting in March or April, the thunderstorms and the tornadoes really start picking up. Here we are in July. We're looking at it again, looking at you know we tornado watches and all that going on right now. So you will also find it associated with hurricanes, although not as prevalent. And, well, of course, I'm in Illinois, so we're not subject to hurricanes in this part of the country. I have not seen them getting so much active though with winter storms. Although I personally think that'll change. Recent events down in Texas and the chaos that ensued with that, I'm of the personal belief that if Aries doesn't get active with it, then perhaps those of us in amateur circles ought to do a better job of communications for winter type events. Personal opinion. Now, Aries, I might add, is a good organization. Many of your National Weather Service offices will have amateur radio stations set up, and they will be manned by either volunteer hams who come into the site during severe thunderstorms and tornado events, or members of the staff who are already licensed amateur operators who will be on the air. Now, what the National Weather Service likes to do, in the last 35 years that I've been in the hobby, computers have come a long way, and radar, Doppler radar, and everything has really blossomed. But the radar can still only tell them so much. When you start hearing the tornado warnings going off from them, you'll often hear them refer to a radar indicated tornado. Okay, that means they're seeing the hook from the radar indicating there's a tornado there, but they don't have the eyes on the ground verifying that, hey, there is in fact a funnel cloud or there is in fact a tornado on the ground. The National Weather Service does like to have hams, trained spotters out there visually making a visual of this stuff. Hey, we've got a funnel cloud or we've got a tornado on the ground. To actually make a visual verification of that this is actually what's going on. Because again, the radar can only tell them so much. Or we've got a tornado, we've got a funnel cloud, we've got hail, heavy rain, wind, etc. Plus damage reports. Trees down, limbs, roof damage, etc. So they can better track just how the storm's progressing along. The National Weather Service too also has storm spotter classes, and this is a basic meteorology course. They'll tell you what to look for in the way of storm clouds, and which ones are most likely to drop tornadoes, etc. I have personally not taken this class, and I've been amiss in that, and I really need to get on the ball and get this dealt with. Prior to the global sickness taking everything, these were held in person, and the National Weather Service would post a list of where in person these storm spotter classes were being held. Usually at a community college or something along those lines. You register to take the class one near you. They would have a beginner's and an advanced. And at the completion of this, you were given, a storm spotter number, etc. And that way, when a severe weather outbreak came and they got on the ham bands and started getting reports, you could give them your storm spotter number, and they would give more credence to an actual trained storm spotter versus somebody who was not one. You know, not to say that an untrained spotter couldn't spot a tornado or etc., but just the trained ones always seem to carry a little more credence with them. We're getting reports from trained spotters that tornado, funnel cloud, etc. So uh, let me see what else we got going on with that. I think that pretty well covers it here, y'all. But uh, we have to question right now too. Why is this important in the amateur radio sector? So much news and everything going on. And for preppers, you'll understand why. Okay, how many cyber attacks have gone on just in calendar year 2021? We had JBS Foods down in Texas. We had the pipeline fiasco. We've got this cyber polygon thing going on now. So who knows when our cell grid could fall victim to any of this? Who knows? The weather service may at some point. You never know. These hackers get some goofy ideas just to try to mess with us. I the power grid could take a hit. Okay. Plus, think of some of the other events. Texas earlier this year, all 254 Texas counties fell victim to a winter storm warning, something I had never seen. Plus, just the other events between tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, hurricanes, etc. Let me add here too, with tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, these are local events, and the radio communications that happen there will be generally 2 meters or 440. Okay, now when hurricane season gets into full bore and the hurricanes start forming, you'll start seeing announcements in amateur radio circles on some of our news forums and that a hurricane net is on the air. These are generally on 20 or 40 meters, the HF bands. Generally on sideband. The frequencies will be listed plus the times. The purpose for this being, of course, hurricanes can take a big swath. For us here in the States, a lot of times they can hit anywhere from the Texas Gulf Coast going all the way up the eastern seaboard. Hurricane Elsa, of course, just came ashore in Florida. Of course, dropped off to a tropical storm, but then still went up through Georgia and into the Carolinas. So, the scope of the event, many more hams can be affected. Much more of the population can be affected. That's why it goes HF. You've got a broader scope of hams that can get active and start participating in the nets and things like that. Earthquakes is something else to think about too. I was thinking back to a quake that hit Mexico City. I thought it was much later than what I was remembering. Stuff I was finding online said 85. I thought 88 for some reason, but it pegged an 8-0 hitting Mexico City in September of 85. Only emergency communications getting out of Mexico City at that time, low power, what we call QRP, low power CW operations. Okay, this was before a lot of the weak signal digital stuff came along. CW was about the only way to go. So this is why I encourage all of you to pick up and start learning your Morse too. Not because you have to, because it's no longer a requirement for the amateur radio license, but because now you would want to make it enjoyable, make it fun. Otherwise, it's going to become a chore and really turn into a drag and become work, and you're not going to like it. But it can also be beneficial in emergency scenarios like this. So uh, you never know when something like that can come into play. All right, with that, y'all, that's all we got on emergency communications for now. May discuss more of this later on. Let me know what you think in the comments, questions, comments, etc. And with that, you can go out.